Hello and welcome to the next webinar in the series brought to you by Strengthening the Heartland. My name is Amber Letcher and I'm one of the co-leaders of this group. This webinar is in our how-to series and it's a really timely topic for today, as many of you know. Before we get started and I introduce our speaker, I have a couple announcements for you. First of all, if you'd like to follow along with the presentation, there are handouts linked in the handout portion of your panel. If you have questions during the webinar, feel free to type those into the chat box. You can type those in at any time. We typically go through those at the end of the presentation, but for sure, if you have any questions throughout, please feel free to type those in. And then lastly, we do ask that you fill out a short survey at the end of the webinar. It really helps us plan for future presentations and your feedback is really important to us. So there is a link to the survey in your chat box right now. And if you are watching this via a recording, you should be able to find that link wherever you access the recording. So with that, I will introduce our speaker for today. This is Audra Janke, and she is a wellness educator and wellness coach with Sanford Health. So welcome, Audra.
Oh, thank you for that wonderful introduction. Welcome, everyone. I'm so excited to have you here today. I know that in these times, there's a lot of different places and ways that you could be spending your time. So I really appreciate you choosing to spend it here with me today. So with that being said, let's get started. What we're here to talk about is taking care of yourself in uncertain times. This is a tough space to live in. It very much feels like we are, or at least I am, I'll speak for myself, kind of in a place where we are culture shocked. My life looks very different today than it did about a month ago. There's not a lot going on outside. There's not really a lot of places to go. All I know is that it's a day that ends in Y. I don't know if it's a work day, an off work day. A lot of things are running together. And during times like this where there is a lot of culture shock, making sure to take care of yourself is how you'll get through this and come out better on the other side. So that's what we're here to talk about today, is places to add structure and places to add adventure in your life. When we spend a lot of time in the same spaces, we got to find some way to entertain ourselves. So we're going to talk a little bit about that too. So with that being said, one of our big goals today is for you to walk away with a concrete plan, a take care plan for how to structure this time as we figure this all out together. So as Amber said, we've got a take care plan handout in the chat, but I would encourage you, if you have it available, grab that old pen and paper and go through the act of writing as we create this plan together. There's something therapeutic and something that makes a plan concrete when you write it down. So if you'd be willing, grab that pen, grab that paper, make this interactive. So that way you've got that takeaway piece that you can implement right away. But before we do that, I would love to know, how have you been feeling lately? What are some of the things that are running through your head? If you'd be willing, share in the chat. Give us 1 to 3 words that describe the way that you've been feeling lately. So we'll give everybody just a minute, hop in that chat box, type out that word or 2 or 3 that best describes where you are. I know for me, like I mentioned before, culture shock is a big one, but I would love to know what you guys are experiencing. I've talked to a lot of people over the last 4 weeks, and I've heard a lot of different things. So,
And
please.
also just a reminder, when you are typing your words into the chat box, those will be anonymous, so other people on the call won't be able to see those, just in case you're wondering.
Oh.
Let's see, we've got some disconnected, restless, and overwhelmed, stressed seems to be a common one, lonely, some grief, and I see some tiredness in here as well. Um, let's see. At first relieved, but getting a little restless right now. Unorganized, bored,
Yep.
unmotivated, some taking time to reevaluate some priorities.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Not feeling very useful, not as useful as before. Missing contact with loved ones.
Absolutely. Yeah. If you're still typing, yeah, absolutely finish that
Yeah.
out. I don't know about you guys, but when I've asked this question, I'm always amazed at the wide range of what folks are feeling, because especially the person who described this time as at first relieved, having a little bit of airspace where, okay, we don't have anywhere to go for the moment. I see that in myself, but with bored, unorganized, absolutely. A lot of us are feeling a lot of the same things as we learn through this time. Some of it is good, some of it's not so good, but many of us are feeling the same things, which I personally, I find that kind of helpful to know that I'm not alone. So thank you guys for being willing to put your ideas out there. So here are our objectives today. We're going to explore the basic ideas of resilience, because when we think of taking care in uncertain times, that is what we're after. We are after the idea of resilience, being able to cope with a brand new situation, having to kind of relearn how we work through a day and to come out better on the other side. What we're looking for is the resources that we have externally and internally to cope with this. So we'll explore some of those basic ideas. And then again, the big takeaway is your plan, because you are an individual that comes to this situation with different needs and different resources. That plan necessarily has to be personalized for you. So like I said, I would encourage you, the handout's great, but if you have it, grab that pen and paper so we can get to work on creating a plan that's going to fit you perfectly. So here is one of the biggest ideas. And we saw this a little bit as we worked through the chat. It's okay not to be okay right now. And if you take nothing else, take this. It's okay not to be okay right now. But if you're not okay, it's not okay to get stuck that way. Whatever you're feeling right now is totally okay. It's necessary for you to feel that. But if what you're feeling is not so pleasant, and we'll talk about ways to decide where you are on kind of an emotional spectrum a little bit later in the presentation. If right now it's not so good, that's all right. But let's take some intentional and active steps to move forward, to get you closer to feeling better on a regular basis. So I would like to introduce you to an idea that really has helped me a lot. It's the idea of a feels dashboard. I know when people ask me how I'm doing, I sort of fall into this habitual answer. How are you? I'm good. I'm good. I just answer what people expect me to answer. It's kind of a test. Like, okay, do you want to talk? How are you? Okay. It's just a little social exchange. And if people dive a little bit deeper, I don't always know what to say. How are you really? I don't know. Good. Why? I don't always know. So by introducing this idea, a quicker way to kind of gauge where you are emotionally, I find it really helpful, because you don't necessarily have to come up with words to really kind of gauge where you are. So let's meet this feels dashboard. And it's very, very simple. It's pleasant or unpleasant. How are you right now? The feels dashboard asks, are you good or bad? Are you feeling well and happy or not? So when you start to think about a quick gauge, how are you right now? It not only gives you information, but it can inform that intentional action that you take. If you know that you're towards the sad face part of the spectrum today, it can inform what you choose to do. If you know that you're a little more towards the smiley end of the spectrum, you can look for ways to keep that up. And again, as you consider this idea, there's no right or wrong way to feel. No one's going to be happy all the time. We're humans. We have that full range of emotions. Wherever you are right now, it's okay. It's where you need to be. But when you want to take action to feel differently, this can help inform what you choose to do. So that is the feels dashboard. If you're more of a verbal person, and I've met people along the way who are, I often wish that I was, to have such a wonderful large vocabulary at my disposal. Oh, that would be lovely. But as you think about the idea of feelings, it's also helpful to have words that go right along with it. So if you are more of a verbal person, I find that this wheel is really helpful because what it does is it kind of sorts emotions into categories. And you'll notice as you look over this that things are color coded. The basic emotions are towards the center of the wheel, and it just goes out from there. More gradation, more options for ways to more accurately describe how you're feeling. So if you've got that pen and paper, if you've got our take care plan, I would love to know. First, let's go back to the feel slide. Where are you today? Are you more towards the smiley face? Are you more towards the frowny face? Draw yourself a line. Put those faces on the edge. Mark where you are. How are you feeling today? And once you've got that mark, see if you can put some words to it. Give yourself a little bit more information. What would you like to do now that you know when you have that word? All right, so let's continue to move forward. Once you've got some sort of data, something coming into the system, once you know how you feel, that's when we can start to take action. And what we're looking for is creating structure in a world that does not feel structured anymore. When I think about my day, and especially as I reflect towards the end of it, I'm sometimes surprised because I will ask myself, what did I do today? I don't know. Where was I? I was with me the whole time. I have no idea what I did. It's hard in a world that has really no separations to be able to mark anything as different, to have things that are going to stick in our memory. It's easy for the day to kind of get away from us and nothing really stands out. So part of taking care of ourselves in this time is by creating both order, a structure that we can live within, things that we can count on, and some adventure, something that's going to make each day a little bit different from the next. So that's our second big idea in this presentation, is the idea that we need order and we need adventure in order to make this time most fruitful. So how do we start to do that? How do we divide things so that way we know what to do first? It's one thing to say that we need order and adventure, but how do we actually start to put it into our lives? There are some places where we can start to look at doing this. It's much easier to organize it when it's broken into smaller pieces. So we can add order in our environment, in our body, and in our mind. When we think about the idea of our built environments, the places where we're staying most of this time, the sites, the experiences that we have regularly, they really matter. When we're in a place for extended periods of time, making sure that what we experience there is pleasant most of the time is very, very helpful. As I was creating this presentation, I found myself thinking of Marie Kondo quite a bit, the gal who encourages us to organize our space and love the things that are in them. So when we think about creating order, our environment can be a big part of that. But the second place is within this meat suit that we all wear. I don't know about you guys, but when I inventory my day and consider how much movement I get, and then I get feedback from my smartwatch, I'm often sort of dismayed at what I see. I can spend a good chunk of my day completely still in a chair, consuming things, connecting with people via these electronic channels. Our body is made to move. And I don't know about yours, but my body is starting to complain some about being so stationary. So when we start to build order, we need to consider what we're doing with our body to keep it up, to keep it challenged, and to keep it functioning at its best when we're in this new situation. So when we think of order in our body, building a body care routine into your day, finding little pockets where we can put some self-care for the meat suit is really, really helpful. The third place where we can create order is in our mind. Being able to observe and accept what we're experiencing is a huge part of this. We also want to kind of assess whether or not what we're thinking regularly is helpful, especially in this current age of 24/7 media and sensational media. Being able to control what it is that we're experiencing sometimes requires that we call a timeout on that media, go on a little media diet, and assess what our thought patterns are doing without that external input. So where can we start to create some adventure? How can we take these things that we're experiencing basically all day and create some adventure? Well, we'll organize it in exactly the same way. The idea of our environment, changing familiar aspects by improving them or using them in new ways. Here's where the living room picnic can sometimes be helpful. Places where you spend a lot of time can get kind of dull. Figure out a way to use them in a new way, or maybe improving them. Now is the time to tackle that project that you might have been thinking about. I personally am thinking about some bookshelves to tackle the books that seem to be scattered throughout my house. Take time to consider that environment. How can you change it in some way to make it new and special? The second place is in our body. When we do a lot of the same things, especially when it comes to body care routines, our body's really smart. Like, it knows what's up. If we do the same workout routine more than a couple of times, our body gets really good at sort of down regulating it. It says, I've seen this before, so I'm going to use less energy to do it. Now is the time to be adventurous with your workout routines. Try some new movements. Try that crazy workout you've always wanted to get a hold of. I personally have some belly dancing tapes that I'm looking forward to digging out of the closet. Will it be weird? Absolutely. Will it be fun? Absolutely. Try some of that stuff. There's all kinds of wonderful things on YouTube that you can experiment with, but give yourself something new to experience. It doesn't matter whether or not you're good at it. Just try it out. You never know, you might find that new favorite. The last part is in our minds. We want to be adventuresome with the ways that we think. What's something you've always wanted to learn? For me, it's been exploring the idea of making a decent cup of coffee. If there's ever something that you've wanted to learn more about, now is a great time to do that. If nothing else, in this new world, we've got all kinds of information at our disposal. Get out there and see if you can learn more about that topic you've always wanted to learn more about. If you've had questions about something, if there's something that you want to do, now's the time. All right, so let's dig into this idea just a little bit more. As we consider ways to explore our environment, there are other ways that we can break this down. As you consider your environment, consider the time that you spend during certain pieces of your day. Are there certain touchstones in your day that are non-negotiable? For me, it is that cup of coffee in the morning. That's how I start my day. Doing this signifies that it's time to start my workday. So if you would be willing, if you're working from a pencil and paper, grab that pen. What are some of the touchstones in your day? What are the things that are non-negotiable that tell you it's time to start or stop an activity? Jot those things down. Those are the things that we want to maintain, the structure that we want to create to make your day a little bit easier to navigate. Once you've got those on your paper, start to consider the spaces in your life. As you heard those ideas about how to make your spaces a little bit better or a little bit different, what occurred to you? Catch those ideas on that same piece of paper. That might be a list of things that you can take and try over this allegedly rainy weekend. Catch those things so that way you can try them out later. And the third piece is travel. We really can't be out and about in the way that we once were. but traveling through your spaces and how you choose to do that throughout your day matters in a really important way. When you transition from one space to another, for me, it's this little corner where I've built my office. When I'm in this space, this is my workspace. What do spaces and getting in or out of them mean for your workday? Jot whatever occurs to you on that worksheet. All right, so let's explore the idea of body in a little bit deeper way. There is a note that we need to make as we explore the idea of body, and we touched on it briefly a little bit earlier, but it is the idea of consumption. Our body is this system that we have to feed things into, whether it is food, whether it is movement, whether it is content that's coming into our lives. Consumption and being choosy is really important. I found that during this time, my habit of being an emotional eater is sometimes kicked up when I find myself stressing out just a little bit. So as we think about this idea of consumption, be mindful of what you choose to take in, whether it's food, whether it is content. Be choosy about what you put in. Let's go to the worksheet for just a second. What do you need more of when you think about consuming things? Is it more fresh fruits and vegetables? Is it more water? What could you use more of to help your body function at its best? Once you've got those ideas, what do you need less of? For me, it is media and Twinkies. Those two things, they're problematic. I know that I need less of both of those items. What is that for you? What do you need less of right now? So once you've caught that, let's explore the idea of breathing, especially because we are stationary for much of the day, or at least I am. Maybe your life is different. If it is, good for you. Excellent, keep that up. When we're sitting quite a bit, the way that we breathe can change. When we couple sitting with being stressed, our breathing changes very markedly. In fact, our breathing typically goes from being nice, deep belly breaths that we take from our diaphragm way down here to being shallow and shoulder-based way up here. So if we could, this is a little weird. I feel weird asking, would you guys be willing to breathe with me just for a minute? Okay, I'm going to assume you said yes. Thank you for that. If I could borrow your hand for just a moment. Take one of your hands and look for the little cartilaginous bit, the little squishy bit that's on the bottom of your rib cage. Should be somewhere at the bottom of your breastbone. Once you've found that little cartilaginous bit, take the heel of your hand right here, your palm, and place it over that spot. When we want to de-stress, when we want to calm ourselves, what we need to do is move that hand out, away from our body. We need to expand our lungs that are in this part of our body. So if you'd be willing to breathe with me, I would love for you to practice that for just a second. In fact, what I'll do is I'll count and indicate when you should inhale and exhale. Is everybody ready to breathe? Yay! All right, so let's inhale and exhale. Let's go again. Inhale and exhale. Every time I do this exercise, I'm always struck at how much better I feel. And I wonder, how long has it been since I've taken a deep breath? When you need to de-stress, when you need a little mind break, use that tip, that belly breath, to be able to kind of reset yourself. It not only feeds your need for oxygen, which can be starved when we're collapsed and when we're stressed. It can also help change your mindset in a big way. The third piece of body is movement. As we talked about, take a look at your day and look for pockets. Where can you insert more movement into your day? Whether it's a quick spin around the block, whether it's a walk down the gravel road by your home, find some way to get out and move just a little bit more. I hope you haven't heard him scrambling around in the background here, but I have a dog that's wandering around. I have to let the dog out many times throughout the day. He goes out a lot. And when he is outside, he usually takes somewhere between 3 and 5 minutes. Those are my pockets. I spend that time doing squats by the door, waiting for him, or doing some crunches. Look for those things that you know you have to do regularly and couple movement to them. When you do that, it easily fits that body care into an already existing routine in your day. So another thing that we need to talk about is the idea of stillness in our body. When we sit quite a bit, it can feel like we are still. Why would we need more stillness in our lives? Well, when we are sitting, typically, we're not just sitting. We're usually consuming some sort of something. We're working, we're thinking, our brain is very busy. When we can couple stillness of our body with stillness in our mind, it can be a huge way to recharge. It can give you a little bit of space to be able to kind of process what's been going on, whether it's a meditative thing where you lay on the floor, whether it's just a comfortable chair that kind of forces you to sit upright. Find some place to be well and truly still throughout your day. As we've talked through these components of body well-being, my hope is that you've been taking some notes, jotting some things on your piece of paper there. If you haven't, now is the time to capture those ideas. Catch the things that you think might be useful for you to try right now. So we talked a little bit just a moment ago about the idea of conscious consumption. And this for me is a huge part of being well during these uncertain times. I hope that I'm alone in this, but I guess my instinct is to try to learn as much as I can, to try to be informed, to try to be prepared. And that tendency sometimes gets me in trouble. Because it is so easy to almost be over-informed and to be anxious because of that over-information. Conscious consumption, being very choosy about where you spend your time and your energy and the space in your head is a key component to being able to manage this time well. Being conscious about what you consume means knowing who you trust. Where can you get reliable information from? And once you know where that reliable information is for you, decide about all the other spaces where news might come from. For me, it's my social media feeds. Sometimes when I look through there, I am dismayed at the amount of news and the amount of differing opinions that are in that feed. Be choosy about what you consume, so that way you can be in charge of how you feel. I've sometimes heard this described as a media diet, which I think is a marvelous way of putting it. Deciding what matters to consume and what doesn't, because you only have a finite amount of time, energy, and attention. When you are choosy, you can use that time to get you closer to what you value. Choose those trusted news outlets and stick with them. And as we talked about on the body slides, being choosy about what you consume for your meat suit, whether it is water, whether it is food, being choosy about what you consume for the health of yourself is also very important. So be choosy about what you consume. As a little reminder, as you go through this idea of body, as we talk about the idea of conscious consumption, make yourself an additional note. Did anything else occur to you as we went through this? When your body is healthy, the vehicle that carries you through life is also healthy. This is critical to being resilient. So catch those ideas so that way you can try them out later. We want a plan that works for you. So I would like to introduce you to the second piece of knowing where you are from moment to moment. It's the energy dashboard. We just got through talking about the idea of having a well body, Energy is a key piece of that. One key way to be able to get an instantaneous snapshot of how you are is to ask about your energy. Is your energy high or low today? And in fact, if you've got that piece of paper, I would encourage you, draw this vertical axis. Where are you today? Are you high energy? Are you raring to go? Or maybe not so much. Mark where you are on this continuum. This is also input for what to do with your time and your available energy. When you know where you are, you can decide intentionally what to do. So let's talk about the third piece of creating adventure and order. It's in our mind. We talked just a little bit about some things that we can do to create order and adventure. But let's talk in a little bit more detail about that. When we think about mind, there's actually a couple of different pieces to that. What we think is part of mind, but also what we feel can be part of our mind. The conscious thoughts that we have are absolutely there, but the feelings that are generated about those conscious thoughts, about what's happening external to ourselves, also really matters. And these are two components that we need to consider as we work through the idea of order and adventure in our minds. So I'd like to introduce you to these two parts of you. So as we consider the idea of thinking, what we're talking about is the bit of your brain that's right behind your forehead. In fact, if you'd be willing to be silly with me for a moment, take your index finger and put it right between your eyebrows, right here. This is the thinking part of your brain. Thank that part for being able to do things like calculus and to plan for retirement. This is the part of your brain that allows you to be logical, to plan, to think for the long term. And speaking to this part of your mind is a key part of getting through this well. Your thinking part is actually a little bit slower. It takes a little bit to catch up. And when you're scared, when you're hungry, angry, lonely, tired, sad, when you're not at your best, when your energy's low and you're in the grumpy face part of the continuum, this system doesn't work very well. I know I've been on several diets throughout my life, and I know that when I'm really hungry, planning for the future kind of goes out the window. All I can think about is that Snickers bar that I really had rattling around upstairs. When you're not at your best, it gets really hard to think. So what that means for today is that if you find you are anxious, if you find you are scared a lot of the time, it can be really hard to think. If you find that you've been a little foggy, that might be why. It's okay. Once we start to put more structure around your day, once we start to find places for you to get adventurous, your thinking will improve. So the second piece is that feeling piece of us, and that's all the rest of our brain. This is a really fast system. Sometimes I know what I'm feeling long before I can ever put it into rational thought. When we are feeling, all it is giving us is information. When we feel something, it's telling us what we need. Our feelings are a way for us to communicate with all of the different parts of ourselves. It tells us whether or not our current circumstances are a good fit for what we need. So let's talk a little bit more about how we can better use those thinking parts of our brain. And in the handouts portion, you're going to have these worksheets. So as we go through this, take those on board, use them as we go forward through this time, because they're going to allow you, if you want to change the way that you think. When you're calm, when you're able to think clearly, it's great because you can actually kind of pick out and notice what you're thinking regularly. By giving yourself the space to do that, and quite honestly, to catch the thoughts that you regularly have, you can incrementally push yourself towards more resilient patterns of thinking. So the two worksheets that you're going to find are about framing and reframing. What we think about things, the story that we tell ourselves, matters. a lot, because what one person can see as something positive can be another person's negative. By giving yourself the gift of being able to see from different angles, from looking through different perspectives, it can allow you to see what might have been a troubling situation in a very new way. This worksheet is going to give you the tools to be able to do that. If you catch that automatic thought, you can go through and find alternative ways to see that thought. The second piece of this is cognitive distortions. I've always been a really big fan of Sherlock. Does anybody watch that show? I love it so much. Benedict Cumberbatch, amazing, so good. But one of the things that Sherlock does really, really well is he's good at seeing errors in logical thinking. They're sometimes known as cognitive distortions. When we are able to clean out the cognitive distortions that we have, because everybody has them in one way or another, we all have errors of logical thinking. When we can clean those out, when we can dispute those errors, it can give us a clearer picture of what's actually going on. It can actually get us closer to being in touch with reality. So I would encourage you, try out the worksheet that has this on there. And this is from a wonderful web podcast that if you're interested in this kind of thing, check it out. It's called the Psychiatry and Psychotherapy Podcast by Dr. David Bruder. Amazing, so good. If you got a little extra time and you love this, check it out. That worksheet is from him. It's actually an 8-day journal that will allow you to catch those thoughts and then dispute them. So now let's move into the more emotional pieces, being in the feels, so to speak. As we start to think about how to be in our feelings during this time, there are some really great ways to do it that can help us be more resilient. The first thing that we need to do with feelings is to check in. It always feels better to me, especially if I'm anxious and kind of scared, to be busy, to just fill my day with stuff to do, to check boxes because it makes me feel better. But I've found that if I can resist that tendency and give myself a little pocket of time, a timeout, so to speak, and check in with where I'm at, I can get better data for what to do with my day. If I know that and can recognize in the moment that I'm anxious, I can find an outlet for that anxiousness. Anxiousness is usually a high energy emotion. If I can find something to do with that energy, that's going to help me throughout the day. So give yourself the gift of checking in. Just take 30 seconds somewhere in your day and ask, how am I right now? So you might recognize some pieces of this wonderful graph from earlier in the presentation. This is a total picture tool. When you need to check in, this gives you information from both of those axes that we saw earlier in the presentation. You can check in with where you are on the smiley and sad face. Where are you on that axis? And on the energy axis, are you more high energy or low energy? When we put these two things together, as you see here on the slide, we can have a full picture, an instantaneous read of where we are, and that can inform what we do. You'll notice that in addition to those two axes, we've also got some feeling words inserted here. The words that you see here on this graph might be a good fit. Maybe they don't quite describe what you're feeling. Take this tool with you if it's helpful. I like to kind of hang this in places throughout my house to remind myself to check in. Which quadrant am I in? Am I in 1, 2, 3, or 4? Am I high energy, low energy, happy, sad? It's an instantaneous read that can help you decide how to best spend your energy throughout the day. So now that you've checked in, what should you do? What do you do with this information now that you have it? There are some really great ways to deal with whatever you find and process it by naming it, claiming it, and accepting it. You can start to move forward if that's what needs to happen. When you have that instantaneous read, ask for more information. If you find that you're not very comfortable with whatever quadrant you have landed in, ask for more information. Take a little bit longer time out, explore what's happening. When you can put a name on what you're feeling, when you own it, say, yep, I am feeling X right now, and accepting that. It's a great way to be able to fully integrate what's happening. For me personally, the hardest part is sometimes accepting. I'm good at reading, I'm good at naming it, and I can say, yes, okay, I'm feeling this right now. But really accepting that is sometimes very hard. I have arguments with myself quite a bit. Well, I shouldn't feel this way. Well, maybe that's true, but here we are anyway. If you can overcome that idea of should, give yourself the grace of accepting what you feel. Whatever you're feeling is totally okay. It's okay. There isn't any way you should feel. When you can accept what's going on, you'll be better prepared to act. So let's explore the idea of acting. In this slide, you're going to see a little bit more about how to do this well. So if you want to know more about naming effectively, claiming, and accepting, feel free to explore this slide a little bit more. Let's move on to the idea of acting. What do you do when you want to act on feelings? What I like to take into account is the idea that feelings are data, not directives. It can be very tempting, especially for me, especially when it's a high energy emotion, to immediately want to act, to immediately want to do something to try to feel better. But feelings are, they're just that. They're feelings. They give us data about whether or not the circumstances we're in fit with our value set, but not necessarily what we should do about it. When we are able to give ourselves a timeout, read the feelings, accept them, and then actively and intentionally decide what to do, we're more likely to take an action that serves our values more closely. So let's talk about that idea for a moment. The idea of knowing your values. When you know what is most important to you, what should always be A1 day one, what am I working towards? When you know that, it can get easier to take action when you feel a certain way. Once you know what the feelings are, you can then look at your value set and decide what you should do. For example, if you really value family and you find yourself in a low energy and kind of frowny face space, reconnecting with a high safety loved one can help raise your state. It can help get you out of that space if that's what you want to do at that time. When you know your values, it helps you choose more wisely what to do with the energy or with the space that you're currently in. So here's another big idea, connecting. Part of getting through this is finding places and spaces and people to get quality connection. But it's not just people, as we'll learn in the next few slides. Quality connection can mean a lot of different things. So where do we find that? The first place that we can find it is actually in nature. When we are connected to the wider world, when we are connected to the earth, to the sun, to creatures, if that's your thing, it can really help us boost mood. There is something about a built environment like the ones most of us are probably in right now that is helpful. It allows us to get work done. It allows us to be safe and sheltered, but it also can kind of sap our energy. When we connect with nature, when we connect with creatures, it allows us to get back to that more natural state, and it can change the energy that you experience. All I would ask is that if you go outside to experience some nature, please, please, please wear your sunscreen. I love sunscreen. I put it on at least twice a day in 2 different forms. Please wear your sunscreen. And at this time of year, maybe pop an allergy med if you have trouble with allergies, but find some way to incorporate nature, even if it's just pictures on your laptop. find some way to get in touch with the natural world. So that's part number one. The second thing we can connect with is people, of course. And this is arguably one of the more important ones, especially when we feel like we have to be physically distant. We don't have to be socially distant. When we think about connecting with people, try to interact often with the people that you trust most. I remember in our comments, there was the idea of reassessing. This is a good time to take a look at who helps you feel safe, who helps lift you up. Take a look at the social connections that you have, and be choosy about your consumption. Quality consumption also has everything to do with relationships. So interact often with the people that you trust. Make space both for that connection and for aloneness. I don't know if you guys are having the same experience, but it's not just me here in my home alone. I not only have my pooch, but I have my 2 teenage sons at home. And I know while I love to be with them, we love spending time together, we have a great time, I also have noticed that there are times when they need space from dear old mom. Having a good balance of quality connection and aloneness is the key to managing this time well, because we absolutely want to connect with people, but there is such a thing as too much connection. There are times when we just need a little bit of aloneness, however that can come. So make sure that, especially if you're in close quarters, you've got a good balance of both. Another thing to keep in mind as we go through this, keeping a sense of humor is key to managing connection and people well. Sometimes we have to laugh both at ourselves and with, but not at, others. We're all a little bit mad in our own special way, and sometimes situations like this can bring that out. So keep that sense of humor as we go through this. So the last piece of connecting well is with our purpose. Think for just a moment about what gives you that sense of purpose. What really keeps you going? What is the mission that helps you get through when the going gets tough? Whether it's spirituality, whether it's a cause that you love, now is the time to plug back in to whatever it is that feeds that wider sense of being connected with something bigger than you. If those types of activities are off the table, start to explore if there are other ways to get reconnected with that purpose. I found that online fundraising is kind of a fun thing to do. I love animals, and I've really enjoyed seeing fundraisers to try to meet the need for food, shelter, and adoption fees coming across my social media. I love that idea because it's a brand new way to connect with something that you love, whether it's a cause or that spiritual connection. All right, so we're coming down to the end of the hour here. I have so appreciated you guys sticking with me through all of this, for being willing to write down and consider a plan that's going to work for you as we go through these challenging times. But now is the time for questions. What would you like to know that we didn't cover inside this presentation? What questions do you have about what was covered? Here's your chance to put some things in the chat and we can talk about them.
Thank you so much, Audra. That was really great, and I enjoyed participating in the breathing exercises. No matter how silly it looked, I felt better. So thank you for leading that.
Oh, good. I'm so pleased to hear that. Yes, it's amazing how much of the day we can go through without ever taking a deep breath.
For sure. Yes. We'll give people just a little bit of time to type some questions into that chat box, and then I'm happy to relay those to you. I really liked some of the tips you were giving about how to engage your body and your mind. And I was thinking about one thing that I enjoy doing, which may sound odd, is rearranging my furniture. And it gives me this sense of order. It inspires me a little bit to, have a new space, a new environment, and gets me moving a little bit. So I thought, well, that is, kind of maybe a strange hobby, but it really fell in line with some of the things you were talking about. So even during quarantine, there are things we can be doing.
Yes, absolutely. And that's a really important point. Like you said, you're not only getting a little bit of exercise while you're doing it, but you're
Mhm.
seeing new opportunity in those spaces that you're in
Yeah.
quite often. It's a way to be creative too.
Looks like we have a question here. How do you set boundaries when there are people that are bringing you down and you can't escape them?
Oh, yes. Oh, what an important question. And thank you for asking it. That is definitely a challenge during this time, especially if those people are in your immediate spaces. Here's what I have found helps. The first thing is to look within yourself and look at where you feel like what you need has been breached. I am a recovering people pleaser. I will fully admit that. So my tendency is to always say yes, sometimes even when I shouldn't. The first step to creating those boundaries is by knowing where they are for you. When you can say, all right, this is a situation that makes me uncomfortable, that makes me feel like I'm giving more than I have to give, that's step number one. The second piece of that is to um, basically be able to communicate that to the person with whom you're having this challenge. When you figure out a way to very calmly and rationally communicate what you need to that person, using a lot of I statements can be helpful. I am not feeling like I have energy for this today. Can I get back to you about this thing? Can we table this for a discussion later in the day? Being able to clearly and rationally communicate that is a great way to start that. Um, as a recovering people pleaser, I have also found that that person, especially if they have gotten used to stepping inside of your boundaries when maybe they shouldn't, they're going to push a little bit. What I have found helps in that particular instance is to restate what you just said in a very flat, very calm, and nearly identical way. When you plop an answer in front of someone, a couple, and if it's necessary, even 3 times, they usually get the hint that this is a pretty hard line right here. Um, the next piece of this is to reach around and give yourself a pat on the back for doing that. If you, like me, are a recovering people pleaser, this is really, really stressful to enforce and to be aware of your own boundaries. It's hard to do that, especially when you value caring for people. So give yourself the gift of not only recognizing what you just did, but giving yourself an opportunity to recharge afterwards. If you find that it does drain your energy, do something nice for yourself. Now is the time for a walk around the block, that Dove chocolate. Give yourself a little reward for having done that because it is tough to do that. But good for you for being willing to tackle it. All right. Other questions, comments?
Yeah, please continue to type those in as they come to you. Audra, one thing I was wondering is, and not to put you on the spot right now, but are there kind of go-to maybe online resources that you really enjoy or would recommend? You mentioned the podcast. I think that's a great resource.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, let me think for just a second. I'll organize
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
One of the ones I particularly love for body work on YouTube, there's this wonderful high energy gal that I love so much. Her name is Casey Ho. And at least once a week, sometimes twice if she's feeling particularly energetic, she will put out these workouts called Blogilates workouts. It's such a silly name, but it is marvelous because she is very high energy. I tend towards the low energy end of the spectrum when I've been sitting for too long, when I'm not taking care of myself. Casey is a beautiful dose of both energy, and after you do one of those workouts, you're like, wow, I didn't know I had muscles in that area. So that's a wonderful resource, especially if you need something new, if you want to try something fun. She is great for that kind of thing. I have had really great luck with the Psychiatry and Psychotherapy podcast. Another one that I particularly like, in fact, if it's all right with you, can I pull out my phone and take a look? I want to make sure that I give you excellent resources. Yeah, in fact, the Psychiatry and Psychotherapy podcast recently put out an episode called Meaning and Decision Making in Times of Crisis. So
Oh,
it's
perfect.
yeah, he's very timely and he's very helpful. When I listen to a podcast like that, I really enjoy the way that he's able to not only communicate useful information, but the way that he's able to be calm. I always feel better for having listened to that particular one. Another one that I found when I want to challenge myself in a really great way, this is also a podcast, is called the You Are Not So Smart podcast. And as you can tell from the title, it's meant to challenge things that we all kind of accept are true. The host is marvelous. He's a one-man shop, and he does a lot of really great and very thorough research about some of those errors in thinking that we all have. When we talked about cognitive distortions, he quite often tackles some of the reasons why that can happen. So I particularly love that one if you're wanting to learn something new. Yeah. As you think about things to learn, if you're interested in coffee the way I am, I can't recommend James Hoffman on YouTube anymore. That I love him. He's great. So
That's
yeah,
great.
those are some of my go-tos.
Awesome. Thank you. We have a couple people asking just for those names and resources, and we'll get some links to those. So when we send out the recording of this webinar, we'll have those links provided for you guys too, so you can easily access them. Thank you so much for sharing.
Yes, absolutely.
I don't see any other questions, but if there's some last minute ones, please feel free to type those in. I will put a quick plug for our other webinars, both in the how-to series as well as our opioid awareness campaign. You can find all of these recordings on our YouTube channel. If you just search Strengthening the Heartland, you'll find all of those videos. They are free. Please share them widely. There's some on grief and brain breaks. I think those are probably really timely topics right now as well. So feel free to check those out and share them. And then also, please remember to take that survey for us. We like to get your feedback. A couple comments for you, Audra. People really loved the pace, and your voice is very soothing. So always a nice compliment, I think.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yes. All right. Well, I don't see anything else popping up here, so we will close out. Again, thank you so much, Audra, and have a wonderful day, everyone.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.